Hey folks, welcome back to the Land Fixer Podcast. I'm your host, Logan Swanson. Today, we're talking about land. You guessed it. Still no theme music. Maybe someday. We have a few interesting topics I'm going to cover in the next series of videos. The first one today, though, is we're just going to talk about building a land investing team. And I'm going to give you three different team sizes and types in order to be as efficient as possible in land investing. And I'll tell you which one I'm currently pursuing. But before we get into that, a quick reminder, if you are a land investor and you're looking for funding for your deal, do not hesitate to reach out to me at my funding company, which is landpartnerfunding.com. We have everything that you might need to flip deals, including our assistance in underwriting, selling, and marketing your properties, etc. So very, very valuable service that we extend to our real estate investing partners. If you are looking to sell your land and you need a little bit of help in the marketing department, we have the best land selling website. You list your properties on primelandexchange.com and they go out to real estate investors all over the world, but especially in this country. Enough of that. Well, let's get right into our topic today. We're going to talk about, like I was saying, building a land investing team. And this is kind of pivotal. This really makes or breaks most companies, most efforts, and most endeavors. Because if you do not surround yourself with the correct people, you just start losing on every level. You start losing efficiency. You start losing motivation. You start losing a cutting edge, right? It's because we are in a competitive workspace. So if you're not able to compete with other people, you start losing there. So on and so forth. So we're going to start with the worst example of a land business team, and that is simply you or maybe you and a VA. Okay, this is possible. I actually know a few people who do this successfully. I find it to be the most difficult version of land investing because it's not a team sport anymore, right? You don't really have a lot of people that you can talk with that really understand what you're going through, and you're just having to wear too many hats, and the more hats you wear, the less effective you are at wearing any one of those hats. So if I remember when I started, I actually never really had to go through it alone. I guess I'll say that. I always had my wife with me, and she knew everything that was going on and was able to assist me and be my sounding board and all that. But if you were literally just alone, it is extremely difficult to go from, putting together mailers to receiving phone calls to all of the sort of little letdowns in the business. People just calling you F off, you're a crook, you're trying to steal from me, yada, yada, yada. To then coordinating with a title company, to getting it listed, to dealing with seller leads, organizing all that, building your own systems, managing a CRM, so on and so forth. And it is very mentally tolling. And I don't really know anyone who can do it for a very long time by themselves. Even if you incorporate a VA, I think some people have gotten lucky where they have a virtual assistant that, typically based out of the Philippines or whatever, that actually sticks around for a long time and does excellent work. My experience is I've kind of found that in one virtual assistant, though even that is a little shaky at times. But more likely what you're going to find is a lot of turnover and training and somebody who's not really super effective at the job, or is not very good at just being independent. It doesn't really feel like you've solved a lot of issues when you bring in a VA, in my experience. Typically you take a lot of sacrifices in terms of the results of the work given to them. And then there's this whole other issue of you have to build all these systems and structures and incorporate this virtual assistant who there's a good chance that they just disappear at some point. Some of them, they might be good for a year and a half, and then boom, gone. So I believe that is the hardest approach. Again, that is just you and a VA. Now, the biggest benefits, that is very, very, very low overhead. So you're not worried about feeding other people or really managing a team or paying salaries or, there's just not a lot of money going out. So that allows you to have a higher profit margin, maybe a higher overall ROI. But in my experience, because you get so burnt out and because it's so difficult along the way, you end up missing deals or you kind of have this ebb and flow in your business, ups and downs. You start marketing, you stop marketing. I've been through all this. That's the only reason I can speak to it. And I've also heard of it from a lot of other people. Even heard of people completely dropping land investing entirely and disappearing for a year or two. I was actually just reading something on Facebook, somebody coming back into the industry because they took some time off. And I bet, if I had to guess, they were just burnt out. So moving on to what I call the simple land investing team. All right, so that's going to be you, the owner. It's going to be a couple virtual assistants in limited and strict capacities. And the biggest addition that you're going to make is a transaction coordinator / acquisition manager. This is kind of a hybrid role. Their chief obligation is to handle seller leads. And even that, I would say that's the first point of contact, seller leads. So most acquisition managers you bring in are not going to be the hard negotiators that are going to be closers and all this sort of stuff. That I think that still typically falls onto the owner in these small land investing teams. But it does take a lot of the daily burden off of the regular phone calls or the dealing with the FUs or some of the more general correspondence, and then also transaction coordinating that deal through title, ideally on both sides, right? So on the purchase side and on the disposition side. So much time and energy goes to just dealing with title companies. We do a lot of transactions because we have a funding company and whatever. But it is not a small burden, the amount of headache and chaos that title companies can, cause in your life. So what that does is it takes a huge chunk of nonsense off of your plate and hands it off to somebody, and it's still usually pretty manageable and trainable. And ideally, you would hire someone U.S. based for this, and I would say even local is ideal. There are services like Hire My Mom or even Upwork, whatever. You can still find people that are U.S. based that are going to understand a lot of this stuff. I've also found a good role here. This is a good role for someone who already has maybe a real estate license, but it expired. The number of real estate agents that actually perform transactions annually is very small. So something like, I don't know, here in DFW, it's like 50% of people that have a real estate license or had a real estate license do not manage transactions. But they're educated on it. They're familiar with it. They've handled them in the past. They know the paperwork. They know the contracts. They know how to explain some of the basics. So you can kind of plug and play them. They're also very familiar with, say, different pay structures, right? Because they were paid on commissions in the past. So there's usually flexibility with how you compensate them as well. That's pretty lean. And we have a bunch of ancillary people that we're going to talk about in really building out a team. But as far as like in your organization, I think that is really an ideal situation. You, a BA, and a transaction coordinator / acquisition manager. That is 2 different roles in the next team. All right, and then we get into the larger land investing team. And this is where you really get to the point where maybe you're not just doing flips, maybe you're taking on development projects or subdivision projects or things of this nature. So you are the owner again, and then you're going to want to incorporate an underwriter. So an underwriter is going to do a lot of heavy lifting when it comes to deal analysis, right? So the ideal here would be a lead comes in, we start negotiating a price, and my underwriter is going to hop in and tell me what's the most I can really pay for this property. Or what's a realistic price, especially if you consider any forced appreciation strategies. Because on a flip, that's, it can still take a while, but it's relatively simple math. You're evaluating what's the retail value of this property, and I can pay X percentage of the retail value, 50%, 40%, whatever. But when it comes to entitlement projects or subdivisions or developments, well, there's a lot more that goes into that. You have to and I'm putting together something I'm going to share with everyone for free, kind of as a giveaway when you sign up on my website. But the ideal here for underwriting subdivisions and developments is going to be you need to really understand a lot of things from, what does it actually cost to survey, run a road, run utilities? What does gravel cost? What could gravel cost in 6 months when you're actually buying and putting it down? You're going to compare minimums and maximums of each of these things. And then you have capitalization, right? What is your money going to cost if it's out for 12 months, 18 months, 24 months? What if you have to bring in a partner to fund the deal? Right? That's a lot of underwriting that could go into a development. And that's usually where most developments die. So the quicker that you can kill a development using an experienced underwriter, that's extremely valuable. That allows you to take so much more of your attention off underwriting individual deals, which is very time consuming, and put it back into where your money is made, which is usually going to be on the phone calls or targeting areas. And an underwriter could also assist with targeting areas. What areas should we work, all that. Then we're going to have our acquisition manager. That acquisition manager is going to be, again, handling the inbound acquisition leads. So picking up the phones, answering, doing basics of negotiations, but still heavily involved with you on the day-to-day, because you're probably still going to have to pick up the phone to talk to the most important leads. Then your transaction coordinator, again, they're just moving things through title. Then the last one is on the disposition side. You are going to eventually need somebody. I know I've used VAs in the past. This is a very kind of difficult and amorphous role, but there's a lot of seller leads that need to be stored, organized, talked to regularly, managed into, follow-up campaigns and all this sort of stuff that kind of falls outside of the capacity of most brokers or agents, and is kind of above most virtual assistants. So this is kind of nebulous, and it's going to be different business to business, but you're going to have somebody in sales or CRM management if you really want to be effective, especially if you're targeting a certain area, right? Because if you're going to work in a certain area over and over and over again, well, all of this information compounds. So a buyer's list is going to build year over year, and if you're working the same markets, you're going to be able to nurture and sell to those people. So it's a very, very important position, and it's a lot of lifting that people kind of undervalue. They say get a CRM and you're fine, or just set up an email follow-up campaign. Well, all this stuff needs to be tweaked and updated and modified, and it's all still very hands-on right now. So then we're going to get into the ancillary roles, right? So a lot of people who are established real estate investors are going to know a lot of this, but if you're kind of newer or interested, these are the sorts of people that you're going to want to have a relationship with over the course of your career. And ideally, if you're working in a small market, these people, again, can work with you over and over and over again. But obviously, you're going to need a broker or an agent. These people are very valuable, not only on the disposition side, but even on the acquisition side, right? They can help you. They can bring you deals. They can be like, hey, so-and-so called me. They're desperate to sell their property because of this life situation. Do you want to take a look? They can bring you deals. I've had brokers bring me deals. But they can also just help you evaluate and underwrite. So your underwriter and your broker, if you had a big team, would have a really close relationship, because they could say, what's the market like here? What are the buyers like here? How's the market shifted? Can you quickly give me comps for this area? And if you have a relationship with that broker, they're usually very responsive, and they're going to help you a lot. If you're new, this broker is actually your point of contact for all the ancillary roles, in my experience. So finding a great broker that you can have a long-term relationship with is invaluable. Next, you're going to have your surveyor. You need surveyors more and more these days, because buyers and sellers are getting savvier and savvier, and also the way to be competitive is usually going to be subdivision or development, and there's always surveying going on there. So having an affordable but quality surveyor is important. Now, I do say, like any other trade, you can have 2 of 3 things, right? They say you can either have it cheap, fast, and you can get cheap, fast, and good, but you can only have 2 of them. So you can get cheap and fast, or cheap and good, but it's going to be slow, whatever. Surveyors are obviously like that. I've never met a surveyor that's cheap and good and fast. There's always some sacrifice, and usually we go cheap, good, and drag our heels. But sometimes that's not the case. Sometimes you need a surveyor overnight and you pay through the nose for it. So surveyors are super important. Then you're going to need some sort of operator. I call them operators because, for most projects that I've done, you don't actually need like a full road construction company. You don't need a huge team to do a lot of the stuff that we do. You really need a guy who knows how to run a skid steer, a dozer, an excavator, and has a buddy that he can bring with him. Ideally, you want kind of an old hand or a good old boy, a local boy that's been doing it a long time. And that way you can rent the equipment directly, you can buy materials, you can be the GC of your own projects if you have a good operator that's willing to work with you. So that's super important. I say operator, some people are going to say, road company or something along those lines. You're going to want an engineer. If you're going to get into development, you need a civil engineer that's going to draw up road plans and all this sort of stuff. Then I have a couple other things here. The next role that you're going to want to focus on after that, and I'm probably going to miss something here. It was kind of a quick time I put aside to set up for this podcast. But if you have your broker, you have your surveyor, you have your road guy, you have your civil engineer, the next thing you're going to need is a mulching or clearing company. They are sometimes going to be the same person as your operator. I found often not, because mulching equipment is somewhat expensive. So the people that have it and will work with you affordably, that's mostly all they do. So that's hugely important for clearing lots if they're not selling. Oftentimes the reason a property is not selling is because you drive to the property and you look and it's just trees. And you have no idea to really, unless the average buyer is going to throw boots on and go stomping through the forest, which is not common, they're not going to really know the sort of property that they're buying. Now you have brokers and systems that will make that easier, but I've found nothing really moves a property like clearing it. So you really want somebody who can clear a property for you. And then finally, a couple ancillary ones, but if you're going to have any sort of complexity in your business, you really need a real estate attorney. Not just somebody who's going to be your title company, which is also somebody you need. But you are going to want somebody who can handle very simple things like, and affordably, ideally, like draft an easement, review a JV contract, kind of those quick one-off sort of things. What I like to do now is I like to draft things through ChatGPT and then send it to my attorney to review, and edit and give me notes and feedback on, and then boom, it gets a contract built very, very quickly. After that, you're going to need your title company. Title companies are hugely important, and I say you actually kind of need 2 or 3 title companies. I've found that you can get title companies that are just like any other contractor, cheap and fast, but not very good. You may not want to use them for complex title situations or multiple beneficiaries in a deal. Then I have a title company that's more expensive, but they're excellent at follow-up and getting deals closed and handling more complex transactions. So I suggest having 2 in most areas that you're going to operate in regularly. And if you don't, you can run into issues, especially because some may get booked up. They may have a high volume and you may need to go to someone else, and you really don't want to be guessing. You don't want to be assuming that. I've had title company nightmares, so it's just something to really pay attention to there. And then finally, your drone operator. This one's kind of huge. Drone operator is going to be the difference in your marketing. I've hired, dozens of drone operators, and then I just ended up becoming my own drone operator for properties because it's almost impossible, not almost impossible, it just takes a lot of work to find a drone operator that really understands taking imagery of land. Especially if you're going to get video. You kind of want video that's going to follow contours, and it's a marketing piece. They kind of see it as like all right, I took a photo of the land, what else do you want? Well, there's ways to take photos of land that highlight maybe the river view, or maybe there's a water feature nearby, or the hills, or maybe there's, if it's a recreational property, maybe the mountains are in the background, or whatever. They need to have somebody who's actually going to be able to capture the beauty of the nature, because oftentimes we're selling property that isn't just the land itself, but it's access to something around it, access to a state park, access to a lake, access to some sort of lifestyle or recreational purpose. And sometimes you need a drone operator that's going to take selective photos. Like we had a property that's got a junky neighbor. So it's not like we hid it. People still went and visited the property, but that wasn't chief in our marketing material. We took the pretty photos and kind of left the other photos to the back of the imagery. And each of the, I could go on and on about how you find these quality people. And I'll just cover sort of some highlights over it. One is, just a general principle is hire slow, fire fast. So anytime you're bringing somebody in, it is worth it to put in the effort to have multiple calls, survey a lot of people, talk to your friends to find out who they've worked with in the area, other real estate investors, and then be picky. Like, this is something that I think I'm still learning. Be really picky, because if you are not setting the tone for the sort of people that you work with, no one is. So you will, if you are not actively striving for excellence, you will run into people who are also not actively striving for excellence. And the difference between, I would say 20% of people in any profession are good, above average, or I should say not above average, that's 50%, but to the point where you would be excited to work with them. But maybe like 5% to 1% are really the most effective at what they do. And those are the people that you need to work with to have the best business. So it takes a lot of digging to find those sorts of people. It's a whole nother podcast on how you dig deep and establish systems and hiring and firing and all of this sort of stuff. And a lot of it you learn along the way. I'm sure there's a lot of business gurus who can give you very specific ways to do it. I would ask YouTube, I'd ask ChatGPT. I would just put thought and effort into creating a system around finding and hiring people. Because if you don't, you're just not going to get the best people. You're probably going to get okay or bad people. And that's not going to run a successful business for you. So I've rambled on and on about this. I hope that is valuable for some people. And I almost forgot. What segment do I choose? I like the simple land investing team. Okay. Large land investing teams, I tried to get there and it was a nightmare. I think it's, to each their own. I think people who have the corporate know-how to run big teams and really enjoy doing it, like I've done it back in corporate days, but I did not enjoy it. It was my least favorite part of the business. So then I just built a business where I was managing a ton of people, and I've talked about that on this podcast before. It's not fun. So what I'm trying to do now is optimize, see how much, not how many deals I can do, but how much ROI I can get on few deals. And our goal is to have about 5 properties in inventory at any given time, buying and selling 2 to 3 a month with large profits. That is something that I can do with a 3-person team. Me, myself and my wife, I can say me. But us, VA, acquisition manager / transaction coordinator. It's kind of one role. It's actually, okay, so we have 4. We have an acquisition manager and a transaction coordinator. But very simple team that operates really well together. And I think you can do $2 million a year with that setup, So that's my preference. I do not like large teams. Ugh, they are so tedious for me. All right, folks. Well, I'll wrap it up there. Just a reminder, if you need funding, landpartnerfunding.com. If you need to sell your land, primelandexchange.com. If you are a landowner and you want to partner with somebody to develop or subdivide or sell your land, hey, reach out to me. You can get me at thelandfixer@gmail.com. And I will look forward to seeing you on the next one.